What does the way we dress say about us? What does the way we smell say about us? What does the way we talk say about us? These are all cues that other people pick up about us and the way we are.
Yeah.
And what are the cues, the visuals that we put out about our business saying about our business?
Well, just visuals say something about you, whether you like it or not. You can be intentional or you can be a victim.
What we're going to share with you right now is a framework for how you can put these elements together and create the visual cues within your brand imagery that will be able to communicate effectively the message you want to convey. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm a certified chocoholic. It is my literal kryptonite. When it gets to about 11 o'clock at night, if I'm still working, I start getting the urge to go down the supermarket and get one of my favorite chocolates to eat while I'm working. Or if I'm going to the supermarket, I either have to avoid the chocolate aisle, or if I go down it, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that I'm going to grab something. And the thing about chocolate aisles is the color. When you go near those chocolates, there's an array of color across all the different packaging that really is designed by the brands to attract us. And in Australia, there's a brand called Cadbury that is synonymous with the color purple. And in fact, that color is, for those of you who are into Pantone colors, it's Pantone 2685C. And they've been around for more than 100 years using that color. Now, why am I bringing this up? Well, what was it, about 10 or 20 years ago, Ron?
Yes, it was, yes.
10 or 20 years ago, there was a court case where another company in Australia, I think it was Darryl Lea, wasn't it?
It was.
Started using purple in their chocolate packaging. And Cadbury sued them because they claimed that they owned purple. And Cadbury actually won that lawsuit, that they were the only chocolate company in this country, in Australia, that could use that purple or anything close to it in their packaging. And why is that so important? Because that speaks volumes about how color, type, imagery really becomes synonymous with our brand. And in this case, in Australia, if you show the color purple in relation to chocolate, people will think Cadbury chocolates because they've done such a good job of making themselves recognizable just by a color. And so today, we're going to be looking at that, how the visual elements of our brand, like color, font, imagery, speak and what they say about our brand.
And that lines up with, of course, the final episode of our communication series, because here we're talking about how you say something without saying a word.
That's right.
And so just a quick recap, this is the final episode. Episode 1 was the launch of our effective communication series. We did then the art of listening, the power of smarter questions in leadership, being prepared for a crisis, and we had Mark Williams from Hughes PR helping us with that, having difficult conversations, which is always a challenge, mastering nonverbal communication, presenting with impact and authority, and finally, last time, the 5 steps to avoid send regret and improve your writing. So this is episode 9 of our series and the final one, and it's about how you talk to your customers and to anyone without having to say a word. And it's visual.
Yeah, and let's be frank, so many of us speak constantly through our brand messaging, and some of us don't even realize it. But we'll get into that in the episode.
Yep.
And we're going to give you a few challenges in this episode to apply to your own brand and to question your own brand to see if it's actually communicating what you want it to communicate. So to set the context for today's episode, maybe let's start with some examples. And I'm going to throw a couple of names at you of brands and and you, our viewers and listeners, to think, what do you think about how this brand communicates visually and what it says about it? So one that we're all going to know very well is the Apple brand.
And that's because they do it so well.
Yeah, well, they've been doing it really, really well since, I think it's the 1980s, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some amazing advertising, but some amazing brand imagery. So what do you think their brand imagery and visual communication style says about them?
Well, to me, it's minimalist. There's the very clean logo of the apple with the bite out of it. Everything about their design, everything about their graphics, everything about the actual products themselves says clean, simple. It's sort of like a blank canvas for me to be creative.
Yeah.
And I think they do an exceptionally good job in communicating that we're not the center, you're the center. It's all about you and how you use these products and services that, because they've got into the service area as well.
And they also use a really clever array of color and personality types. So, for instance, the kind of styles of the people in their ads very creative types. So, to me, that whole Apple brand is really appealing to unlocking the creative potential of the people who are using it, or appealing to that creative industry.
Yeah, and again, it's all about the people who use it, not necessarily the products or services themselves.
Yeah, I think about, remember the iPod advertising that they did?
Yeah.
Boy, that was good stuff.
Well, I think about all their advertising. I often use their images in talking about marketing because they do it so well, and it's all about being on song with that one message, creativity.
Okay, so everyone's really familiar with Apple. What about Microsoft?
Okay, same sort of company, very different, very clinical. I know they use multiple colors, but it's primarily blue. It says business,
and it's a very business blue. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not really that
Productivity and
attractive.
efficiency.
It's more that computer blue, right?
Yeah, very much so.
So the whole Microsoft kind of ecosystem is all about productivity and business, whereas Apple's about creative. And you can see those, when you think about that, you can see those huge differences, right? Microsoft we're all about business and productivity and getting things done. Apple's, we're all about releasing the creative potential of every person and business that they're involved with. So two very different approaches to brand.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So what about Tiffany & Co? Have you
another one that uses color. I think of the Tiffany blue. To me, it's definitely all about luxury, and not sort of ostentatious luxury, stylish luxury.
Yes.
And style, and again, clean, simple, elegant. Elegant's the word I would use.
I think of Breakfast at Tiffany's back in the day. I know it's a movie and it's kind of outside of our remit here today, but wow, what a great movie.
Yeah. But again, it fits with the brand. It's all about aspiration.
Well, that's interesting, right? Because I think about Audrey Hepburn and her style, because whether they did it by accident or on purpose, you could argue that because the movie was done quite a while ago.
Well, which one leveraged off which one wonders?
Well, yeah, but now you think of Audrey Hepburn. Well, I think of Audrey Hepburn. Yeah, she's been in some great movies, but I think of Tiffany's because that was so well done.
Yeah.
So there's an imagery, right? There's a personality, and they've done heaps of personalities. But
I think as soon as you see that color, I call it green, you call it blue.
What do they actually call it? We looked this up.
Robin egg blue.
What is a robin egg blue?
Well, I don't know. I haven't seen a robin egg
really
since I was.
blue?
No, robin. The egg of a robin is supposedly that color. So it doesn't matter. It's now called Tiffany Blue because it's become so synonymous with that brand.
And Tiffany is a masterclass in color application because they've been that blue for as long as I've known the brand. And when you see that blue in relation to jewelry, you don't even need to see the name of the product. This is like Cadbury in Australia, right?
Yeah.
So Cadbury's a masterclass in color, 100 years more than of that color. And it stresses the importance of these visual elements of our brand, like color, that people sue over that. And Tiffany would probably do the same thing if anyone crossed their path in the jewelry industry.
Absolutely.
Because they own that blue.
And I think that has happened.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it wouldn't surprise me at all. So let's move down a different track.
Okay.
What about Nike? What is Nike? Who are listening, what is Nike? What imagery comes into your mind when you think of them?
Immediately start thinking about all the images that they use of athletes and so on, and enabling, empowering, getting people to think of themselves as an athlete, being able to enable them to be athletes in a sense. Just do it. You know, the swish, it's positive. It's you can do it.
They have moved away from having their name anywhere. They just have the swish now because they've done such a good job of making that element mean something. And think about it. It's a tick. What does that mean?
Well, it's positive. It's, I'm on the right path. I'm getting the big nod of approval.
So when you think about Nike, Nike is a masterclass in brand building. Like they have, the others are great as well, particularly Apple, Tiffany, Microsoft have done okay, but I don't think they've really focused on their brand from what I can see. They've become something that we go, oh yeah, well that's Microsoft. But I think some of these other brands like Nike are just, again, a masterclass in how to make a brand become something in people's mind. All you got to do is see the tick.
Occupy a space in people's mind.
With Tiffany, all you got to do is see a color in relation to jewelry. With Nike, all you've got to do is see a tick.
Give me another one.
Well, this will be the last one because we got to move on. But this one's really special. And I think I've met people from this company and they say, this has been my dream. This has been my dream to be in this company.
Okay.
The company is Disney.
Why?
So what comes to your mind about the Disney imagery?
Well, I mean, it's all about magic.
Yeah.
It's all about something special, something that is not quite easily explainable.
Yeah.
It's all about the experience and a tingle, you know. It's the magical kingdom. I think of the young days when I used to watch Disney on television, and they referred to it as the Magic Kingdom.
Yeah.
Fantasy.
I think of wonder and imagination and just adventure.
Yeah.
So Disney's done an amazing job with this.
Yeah, it's not clinical like Microsoft. Even the use of Disney's original signature as their symbol is all about personality.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
All right. So that's some examples of some amazing brands that have done really, really well with their branding. So what happens if we ignore the visual side of how our brand communicates, Ron?
Well, what's interesting is if what we do in terms of the visual communication says something, whether we like it or not.
That's right.
If we're either going to be in control of it, which is intentional, or victims of it, which is unintentional. So if we don't get this stuff right, and this is the important thing that I think we need to emphasize today, the way you present yourself in your market speaks to your customer, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
So you can either be in control of it or you can be a victim of it, like I said before. So if you get this wrong, you're going to get disparate messages about what you want to say going out to your customers and maybe saying things that you don't want to say.
So a bit like this, you walk into a restaurant.
Yep.
You sit down and you have one of the best meals of your life.
Yep.
But the staff are rude.
Yeah.
But you go to the toilet and it's dirty.
Yeah.
But and
the decor of the place is, sort of dated or messy or is actually unclean. Doesn't matter.
But you've had the best product you've ever had.
Yeah, but the product is only part of what you're getting.
Correct.
Yeah. And the whole experience culminates in what you think about what you got, the value you got.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so therefore, because we know that we go into some restaurants and we'll walk in and the decor and the way staff act, we think, wow, this is going to cost a bit.
Oh, yeah.
The
uniforms.
It's going to be a fantastic experience.
Yeah.
You walk into a place like that and you've got very low expectations. Sure, you get great food, but you feel like you've been a second-rate citizen when you go in there. You might not be likely to go back. But these are very similar to the way we present ourselves. What imagery do we use? What imagery do we put out about ourselves?
What expectations do we create in the minds of our customers?
Yeah. Through visual cues.
Absolutely.
And we really need to reinforce that point because it's the visual cues. This is what our brands say when they say nothing at all. So visually.
Well, in fact, they're communicating without having to use words.
That's right.
And that's the emphasis of today, that we communicate because of the way we present ourselves visually. And most people, I think, are visual people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that point that you've brought up, about the fact that our brands will say something about us, whether we want them to say something or not, means that we really need to look at how we manage that. So we can either ignore it and it's going to say something about us, or we can actively and with intent manage those visual cues as a business owner, even if it's our own brand. So if it's our personal brand, let's go back to basics. What does the way we dress say about us? What does the way we smell say about us? What does the way we talk say about us? These are all cues that other people pick up about us and the way we are.
Yeah.
And what are the cues that the brand, that the visuals that we put out about our business saying about our business?
Well, just think about the way you go into a bookstore, for instance. How do you buy a book? Is it just pick a book off the shelf? Or is it the visuals that you use as an indicator of these are the type of things that I'm interested in?
And often it's the cover, that full well. Like unless you go in for a specific book, you walk up and down those aisles and you look for something, an interesting title.
Yeah, absolutely.
And an interesting cover. So
and the typeface makes a difference. Let's go down a different path. Supermarkets. How do you buy food?
Well, it's how do you buy food? But what if there's not a lot of difference in price between a whole lot of products that are of similar look? Let's take spaghetti, for example.
Right.
Or soup.
Yeah.
They're all pretty similar in price.
Yeah. And quite frankly, they might argue that they're different in terms of the product itself, but really, are they? In my experience.
We'll take another one where I can give you a practical example. Let's go for dog food. So there was a client that we worked for way back when, I think I was in my 20s, where we created this pet food for a particular client, the packaging. So we did a whole heap of research when we actually created the packaging, is that we went into a supermarket, took photos, of course, of the pet food section and looked at all the color blocking, as in how all the colors look on the shelf. So you go to different supermarkets and you look at how they do different color blocking.
Yeah.
And then one thing is, what color am I going to choose? So the color needs to tick a few boxes. So it needs to make sure that it signifies that this is a quality product and that it's for animals and that it's safe and that it's yummy and that it's all these things. But then it also needs to differentiate from the other products on the shelf. So as we heard with the Cadbury example at the start, if we picked the same purple in the chocolate section as Cadbury, we wouldn't be allowed to do it because they've trademarked it. They will sue. They will protect their space. So we need to find a compelling color that can become synonymous with our brand. And then we need to look at the imagery on there to make it appealing. And then we need to look at the words we use. So when we're talking about not using words at all, we're talking about verbal audio kind of things here, slogans and so forth.
Even the name of the brand.
Very important. So there are a whole heap of considerations as to how to make that product look, because then we end up as consumers standing in that aisle going, which one do I choose?
Which one do I choose?
And how do you pick?
Yeah. And, I'm just thinking about dog food, Chum, Pal, all those brands. And now people are getting a little bit more sophisticated. It's about health associated with your dog. So those brands were appropriate when I just need to think about this for a second. Now it's becoming a lot more about a healthy version. There's health brands associated with dog food. So again, all the imagery has to point towards what's my point of differentiation.
100%. And it has to help us make a decision. But we're talking here about products. Now, products are part of a brand. And so we're saying, what does our brand say when it's not using words, right? What does our brand say when we don't have a chance to speak about it, when we're not around? So products are an extension of that. The way the product looks speaks about our brand as well.
Yeah. So what are the elements? What are the elements associated with visual communication?
Well, there's 3 elements, and the elements really are imagery, color, and font.
Or topography, if you like.
Typography, yes.
Yeah. So those 3 elements. Tell me more about color.
So color, there's a whole psychology behind choosing color, and you can just Google it or ask ChatGPT about color psychology, and there's reams of information you can get about how maybe purple and blue can relate to royalty and green can relate to sustainability. We all know that one. And then other colors can mean different things. Like back in the day, blue was definitely meant boy and pink meant girl, and
yellow means happy.
Yeah, well, I had a boss that used to say this ridiculous thing. He used to say, every other color is just a color. This is my first job in design when I was 20.
And that's why I'm deferring to you, because this is your belly.
Yeah. So he used to say, every other color is just a color, but yellow is a state of being, Brenton. It's a whole world of its own. And I used to think, wow. So, so we might choose colors for a variety of reasons. So the blue in Tiffany that we spoke about earlier, blue is often related. It goes well with gold. Blue, if you look at all the series like Downton Abbey, there'll be blue and gold matched together, and it's synonymous with wealth and luxury, right? Whereas we talked about blue earlier as well with Microsoft, where there is a very corporate blue. So a lot of people will say, if you're doing anything corporate, you use blue. So
I'm in control.
An interesting one, I remember, it was actually one of my bosses. His wife bought a red car, and when she bought this red car, she got picked up by the police much more often. Just random.
But red cars go faster. Everyone knows that.
That's what everyone says. But the red car attracted more attention from the police. And she said it was weird how people just pulled her over and often. And she said,
I want Ferrari red.
Well, she said, I want to change the color of my car. So color really does speak, right? Yeah. That's evidence of it. So color will say something about your brand. There's a whole color theory that we can get into, not for today's episode, but you get the point.
So the second point?
The second point was imagery. So imagery, you said it earlier, an image speaks 1,000 words. Imagery will instantly make us feel something, see something. So in design, especially when we were coming up with concepts, we would have what we would call like the 1 second test. So we'd print the design out, we'd put it on a board and we'd flash it up, put it down and go, what did you see? And if we got the message across in those few seconds, then that design had merit, right? So if you couldn't understand it just by holding something up and putting it down, wouldn't use it. Now, in the same vein, if you look at YouTube, take Mr. Beast, for example,
right.
If you know who that is. Mr. Beast is probably the biggest YouTube star on the planet, and they have a whole team that just do thumbnails, and they spend weeks and then months optimizing and re-optimizing thumbnails for best performance, because the thumbnail and the headline on YouTube is what will attract the clicks. Clicks then get you through to watch the video. You know the drill. But they spend massive amounts of time getting these thumbnails right.
Okay,
so that's speaking about the imagery.
The imagery, symbols, what you associate with.
I go back to Tiffany & Co. and Audrey Hepburn. What does Audrey Hepburn as a person say about that brand?
Luxury, but elegance.
So what if I put Chris Hemsworth in front of a brand? What would that say
elegant.
about it?
No offense to Chris, but not so elegant. Maybe very powerful, masculine.
Fit. He's got this whole fitness thing going on. What if I put Robert Downey Jr. in
Different
front of a brand?
Again, more cerebral, much more maybe Larrikin-like, which is associated with his personality and personal brand. Completely different again.
And we had this thing where we would do workshops with people and we'd say, if your brand is a car, what kind of car would it be? Because just saying that would say a lot about the brand.
Okay, and the third element?
Typography.
Right.
Well, typography says all sorts of things about your brand.
Yeah. So give me some examples.
Well, very basic. You've got serif and sans serif text. So serif text is where you have accents at the end of the characters, where a T looks like it's a bit oldie-weldy. Well, Times New Roman. Perfect example. It's got accents, or what they're called serifs, at the end of the font, and they're a much easier font to read. So I think Garamond, I'm getting really silly now going into too much detail, but Garamond is the book font because it's easier to read, because serif-based fonts are easier to read.
Yep.
Whereas sans serif, where they do not have a serif
at the end,
Yep. A much more direct, powerful business kind of fonts.
Yeah.
They're not generally a body copy kind of font because they are much more abrasive in the fact that they're sleek up and down. They can come across as much more modern.
Yes.
And then the personality in the font, and there's a lot of personality in the font. And a trend nowadays is to incorporate serif and sans serif in the same headlines. So you have a sans serif font with right in the middle of it, one or two words that are with serif. And that's kind of a modern look and feel. But what can these fonts say about you? Well, if it's a cursive font, it can be relaxed. If it's a really bold font, it can mean pay attention. If it's a more modern looking font, it can say you're a modern kind of company.
Clean.
You get it's a lot of personality stuff. So in particular with typography, headlines, body copy, yes, but not so much. But those headlines
make all
the font, it really says a lot. And then subheads and all these kind of things, they give a personality to your communications and will either be inviting, or it might be a font that's got all sorts of different shapes and what we call X heights and Y heights and all these kind of things. And that might be a youthful font because it's got stuff going on.
Now, something that's not an element, those three elements that we talked about, is consistency. You know, when you think about just typography, if you're using one style of font and then you start using a different style of font, and I sometimes see this in the reports that my students provide, you get the impression that even though it's still communication, you get the impression that their thoughts are a bit muddled. Consistency, I think, is incredibly important. Consistency of imagery, consistency of colors. Doesn't mean you have to be boring. We talked about Apple before. They use a palette of colors that are quite bright and imply creativity, but they consistently use those. So I think consistency in terms of your brand is an incredibly important, often overlooked element.
Well, we talk about what is these visual elements saying about your brand. What are they communicating?
Yeah.
Well, what does consistency communicate about the business? That you can rely on it. It's
Yeah.
dependable.
Yeah.
It's going to be something that you can come back to and know what you're going to get.
Predictable. And predictable in the sense that I know what I'm going to get and I'm going to get it consistently.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we create these styles and you put these elements together, they should be intended for our target market. And what we're going to share with you right now and go into is a framework for how you can put these elements together and create the visual cues within your brand imagery that will be able to communicate effectively the message you want to convey. So with that framework, Ron, where do we start?
Well, it all starts with who you're trying to talk to, but defining the message.
Always the base block, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that comes back to our business strategy?
Absolutely. And it has to be consistent with that business strategy, but start by setting clear intentions. I think this is really important. What are you wanting to say? Ask yourself the question, what would people think, feel, or remember about our brand as a result of what we put in front of them visually? That's a really good question to be asking. So that's number one.
Yep.
Create the intention.
Yep.
Okay, so number two.
Number two is then assess your current visuals. So if we've created the intention, we need to go, this is what it wants to say. Then we need to basically do an order and go, so what do our visuals say about us now? Are they aligning with the message that we want to create?
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of ways we can work out how to do that. Firstly, we ask ourselves, then we can put it in front of other people. Remember the test I said when I was back in the creative agency days, holding up the visual and in 1 second, can I communicate? What does it communicate? Get test subjects, talk to other people, show them your visuals, do those tests with random people who aren't associated with the brand. If you don't understand
and people who will tell you the truth.
Yes. And I would say this is where you get expert help from designers, branding experts.
You made it very clear before there's an entire body of knowledge associated with this. And people like graphic designers and so on are schooled in that body of knowledge.
Well, when you think about building a business, and I have this conversation frequently, you're paying money for an office, you're fitting the office out, you're putting staff in it, you're trying to make it attractive so that when clients visit you, that it gives a certain impression. Because we talked about walking into a restaurant, right?
Yes.
How much do people spend on getting the decor of a restaurant to reflect the intent of the product that they're serving you on the plate?
Yeah.
So in the same way, think of your brand as you are creating that environment, that perception. So what intent do you have? And the audit part. So of course we define what we want to say based on the strategy that we're wanting to implement. Then we assess. We audit it to see what it's saying, to work out where is it now. So point one is basically then where are we going to take it?
Yeah.
So
where do we want it to be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the third part of it? So there's 5 parts to this framework.
Okay, so make adjustments and test. And just what you said. So you preempted
Yes.
what I'm going to say, and that is be willing to say what we're doing at the moment doesn't say what we want it to say. So how do we modify it so that we start to get that message across in the visuals before we start talking about anything,
Yes.
before we say anything to customers,
Yeah.
before we say anything to suppliers, before we say anything. What do these visuals say to people before we even get a chance to say a word?
I remember it was Telstra. So I watched this when I was young and learning graphic design. I remember watching this long documentary on how they built the Telstra logo that was about 2 iterations ago. And it took a lot of time, but they had umpteen designs, and I think it was hundreds. They only drew them on sketch paper, and they showed lots of stakeholders because everyone wanted a part of the decision. They got it down to a few, and then they would build presentations on these logos and what brand extensions they could have until they got it down to a core. It was a very expensive exercise back in the day. And
Yeah. Yes, but it's paid off because they're the most well-recognized brand in that field in Australia.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And that just talks about the importance of it. Now, that's one element of the brand, the logo, which then goes into, well, what surrounds the logo, and that is the brand infrastructure, if you want to use that kind of terminology. And this is why I often say we can test these things and try these things on our personal brand and on our business. There might be a bit more testing to do, but my whole point of talking about that restaurant piece and the digital infrastructure piece is if you can afford it as a business, if you're doing well, prioritize and put budget behind how you resource your brand, because your brand and the visuals, as they either make your job harder or make your job easier.
Well, to my way of thinking, the brand is the element of stickiness about whatever you put in front of it, or whatever you offer to a customer. If you've done a good job with the brand, your offer is sticky.
Yes.
It will stick to the customer's thinking.
Yes.
If you've done a bad job, it slips right away and people don't remember it.
Okay.
It's about gaining a place in people's heads.
So you adjust and test.
Yeah.
So the first point, again, was we define our visual message, then we audit our current visuals, and then we adjust and test. So the fourth point is we then go out, once we've put that into market, we gather audience feedback. So once you put something in market, gather feedback, get feedback on it, and work out whether it's actually doing what you want it to do. Or like the teams on YouTube, they refine and they tweak and they refine and they tweak, and then they go, well, we've got this about where it wants to be. And there's no hard and fast rules. And I think, like I said, I think we can learn a lot from YouTubers, right? So people with brands today, they will spend a lot of time researching and resourcing something till they get it out in market. And the way the market moves now is these things, the market changes. So by the time I know one company that's been working 2.5 years on their website. It's been sitting there. And I'm like, guys, by the time you launch this, it's going to be almost out of date. Like, because they're trying to put every single product and make it perfect. I'm like, just get the thing live. Like, make it live.
The only way that you're going to get things better is to do something
Put it out there.
and put it out there and get feedback on it.
Yeah. Now, there
Because-
can be some risk involved with that. You got to weigh up what you're putting out. But my point is, don't ruminate and ruminate and ruminate. Put it out, test, get live feedback, and adjust.
I mean, it's part of the design principle is to iterate,
Yep.
iterate.
And then, look, just to finish off the framework. So we've got basically define your message, assess your current visuals, make adjustments and test. And the last thing is loop back and refine. So once we've got something out in the market, we've refined it, it's working. Okay, we're going to stick with this and do versions of it, etc. Eventually, and at regular intervals, you need to test it again.
tweak.
Yeah, tweak or change the messaging
I
altogether.
mean, the best example I've always used in that refining is Coca-Cola. People think the Coca-Cola symbol is the same, or the Coca-Cola. Yeah, the Coca-Cola symbol is the same as it was 100 years ago. No, it's not. On a regular basis, they tweak it. They tweak it to look more relevant to their target audience now.
There's something really interesting about that, though. If you look at the evolution of the Coke logo, it started a certain way, over the years changed a whole lot, and then it looped back to the way it used to look, and then it modernized a little bit. So it's been a really interesting evolution for Coke and that particular brand mark you're talking about now.
That's
So
right,
that's
yep.
basically one of those elements. That's the the imagery.
Yeah.
What imagery are you using? We talked about that there's imagery, color, and typography. So the imagery of that logo has evolved quite a bit, but not too far from the starting point.
The core of what they want to say, which is we've been around for a while.
Yep. So apply this framework to your own brand, whether it be a personal brand or whether it be your business brand. And I think the challenges that we want to lay down for people today, what are they, Ron? Give us
Okay. Well, I just want to.
what challenge are we going to give to the listeners and viewers?
I would like people to take one element of their visuals, their brand's visual, whether it's a logo, whether it's the colors you're using, whether it's the imagery that you're using. I don't really care. But take one element of that and say, does this element match with what I'm trying to get people to think about my brand?
Yeah, sure. That's good.
And be intentional about that. Does the images that I'm using or the logo that I'm using say something, or is it consistent with what I want to say to my customers and what I want them to think about?
Or the
me?
color. You could take colors and say, what does this color say to you about my brand? Put your logo in the middle of it.
Yeah,
Whatever else, but test one element is what you're saying.
that's right.
And
make
what's
sure,
the relevance of testing one element?
Well, one element you can change, so you can modify, you can improve it to if you find out that it's not saying what you want it to say.
Okay.
And then you can start, again, it goes back to that auditing idea. You can do that to other elements so that you start to get some closer alignment and, most importantly, consistency.
Yeah. And I guess that leaves us with the question. So that's the challenge, to start changing things. But the overarching question is, what is your brand saying about you right now? And is there anything negative that's being said? Is there anything that you're not intending for it to say that it is saying based on the way it looks? And it's worth going out and asking people, what does this imagery, what does this say about the brand, as Ron was saying? Because you'll learn a whole bunch. And I think that's pretty insightful and helpful for your business if you can actually get your brand aligned with what you want to say. So we've covered quite a bit.
Yeah. So I think the key elements of what we talked about today are visuals say something about you, whether you like it or not.
Correct.
You can be intentional or you can be a victim.
And that's my biggest takeaway from our discussion today, that, and like you said, intentional or victim. I want to control my destiny. I want to control what these visuals are saying about myself and my business.
So every color, every font, every image that you use contributes or detracts from what you're trying to say. So be very clear about what you're trying to say, and then use those elements to consistently say that same thing over and over. You'll get bored with it. There's no question. You will get bored with all this stuff in terms of I've said the same thing over and over again. Aren't my clients, or aren't my customers, or aren't my stakeholders bored with this? No, they're not, because you don't occupy that much in their minds. It's very important to you, and it should be important to you, but it's not so much a part of their lives. So consistency in saying the same thing over and over again, really important. And visually, that's going to help you say what you want to say more than anything.
Well, okay, business builders, there was a lot in today's episode. We will see you in the next episode, which I believe we're going to do on networking, as this was the end of our communication series. So until next time, business builders, keep on building.